Hello, friends. We are interested in the geography of our views, so please like and write in the comments from which city are you watching us, and were there loud stories of betrayal in your city? Share your stories with us. Maybe the next betrayal story will be from your city. And we start. Caldwell Springs, Connecticut, is a quiet suburb where maple trees rustle on every porch and lawn mowers start almost in unison on Saturdays. From the outside, the Hayes house is unremarkable. White siding, a porch swing, a neatly labeled mailbox. Hayes. Tiny cracks are hidden inside, which are not yet visible to the prying eye. David gets up before everyone else. 43 years of work and worries taught him to wake up before the alarm clock. 5:45 click, the coffee maker is gurgling. It smells Guatemalan. He nods to his reflection in the toaster as if to encourage him. Let's make it a good one, buddy. The usual ingredients fly onto the table. Oatmeal, maple syrup, sliced strawberries. Almost a ceremony. He makes sure everything is ready when Caroline and Emma come down. The clock clicks 6:20 and Emma flits into the kitchen. Her hair is a mess, and there is a pillow left on her oval cheek. She puts on her headphones, but when she notices her father, she pulls them down around her neck. Morning, Dad. Morning, sunshine. How did you sleep? Fine. I dreamed that they sent me a letter from Brown, but there was a blank page. Strange, right? It's just a dream, David smiles. The real letter will arrive soon, and it will have text. He pats her on the shoulder. Emma is his barometer. If your daughter smiles, it means the day will go according to plan. While she drinks orange juice, her pencil darts across the margins of her notebook. Abstract waves, some tiny faces in the shadows. At 6:38, Caroline appears on the stairs. A thin gray tweed jacket, hair pulled back into an impossibly perfect bun. She seems to be already at work, even standing barefoot on the home carpet. The coffee is hot. David precedes her, moving the milk jug to the mug. Thank you, a short nod. She doesn't sit down. Caroline rests her palms on the back of her chair and glances at her phone screen. A cool blue light flows from notifications. David still holds the spoon over the porridge. Today is Wednesday. Do you have evening lectures? Yes, a seminar on modernists. We'll have to stay late. Then I'll pick up Emma after choir rehearsal. Caroline doesn't hear or pretends to. She is already mentally in the audience, where somewhere between the wasteland and tender buttons the red new message indicator flashes. On the way to Caldwell High, the radio is playing old Fleetwood Mac. David beats out a rhythm on the steering wheel. Emma deciphers the texts in her head. Words of broken promises fall into invisible cracks. Dad, she suddenly turns off the sound. Have you ever wanted to change something radically? Every time I see a loose beam, he grins. But seriously, I guess I love stability too much. Builder, do you understand? The foundation is the main thing. What if the foundation cracks, so it can be sealed? The main thing is to notice in time. Emma looks at him for a long time, as if choosing whether to open her hiding place of doubts. In the end, she just nods and turns the music back on. Caroline has an office overlooking the Avenue of Elms. Shelves in 3 rows, Joyce, Woolf, Faulkner, endless editions Ulysses with notes. Colleagues call her Ice Queen. The article is submitted first, the comments are striking, the nerves are steel. However, even ice has melting points. At 10:15, she latches the door. Second shelf on the left, narrow volume Howl. Hidden between the pages is a thin phone, another. The one that no one at home knows about. M. Can't stop replaying last night. Coffee at 4. C. Office. Back door. Caroline hangs up, holding her fingers. The line of fate on the palm trembled. Outside the city, David is leading the Ridge Vistas project. 10 red brick townhouses. Men in yellow helmets shout over the roaring saw. For David, every home is like a future life. He imagines in advance how someone hangs school photos on the wall, how it smells like cinnamon at Christmas. But today, thoughts too often return to the kitchen. Caroline was standing too far away. The conversation, no matter how short, felt like crossing on fragile ice a creek, and you freeze, afraid to breathe. Boss, Foreman Jake waves the drawings. We transported the 200 by 60 beam, but the truck got stuck in the mud. Tell the guys to clean it up, David breathes, pulling on his gloves. And keep the level, we don't want to reshape the foundation. At 3:40 p.m., the bell rings and Emma dives into the stream of teenagers. She lingers at the notice board, auditions for the school theater, a meeting of the poetry club. To be or not to be, someone's hand hides the advertisement with part of the sheet. Emma carefully adjusts the corner. Let everyone see. A voice inside whispers that being heard is more painful than remaining silent. In the parking lot, she waits until her gray Ford F-150 father will pull out to the curb. The car smells like wood dust and crushed chewing gum. How's the choir? We sing Agnes Dei Barbara. Beautiful, but the guys fake and take pity on us. You'll pull them out, David smiles. Your pitch is perfect. Dad, maybe we can go to the lake on Saturday. I would read to Seamus there. She falters, remembering what use is her mother's favorite Irishman if her mother is now always busy. Of course, he answers. Let's take the canoe as before. Emma just bites her lip. Like before sounds like it was different before. But before this was 2 years ago, before my mother's eyes became opaque. The black door of the service exit creaks, like in a movie. The stairwell smells like wet concrete. Michael Rivers is in a leather jacket, with a wing tattoo visible from under the collar. He lazily rests his foot on the step, holding 2 glasses of latte. Professor Hayes. Michael. She takes the coffee, but her lips barely touch the lid. I only have 20 minutes. Story of my life, he grins. 20 minutes with you is worth an evening with everyone else. Caroline's gaze glides over his stubble, over his cheeky smile, as if checking a familiar book for new lines. The heart skips a beat. Somewhere upstairs, behind the closed office door, lies her life neat, like a proofread essay. Have you ever been afraid to do something that everyone wouldn't approve of? She whispers. The main thing is to do it. Life is short. At the bottom of the stairs, someone slams a door. Caroline winces. Michael runs his finger along her wrist, promising more. The house is greeted with the smell of mac and cheese from a box Emma decided to delight. David plays along, exclaiming that it's the best thing he's eaten since college. The girl smiles for the first time in a day. Caroline returns by 8:15 p.m. The key turns dully in the lock, as if the door is wondering whether to let you in. The hallway is warm and cozy, but it requires effort to feel like a guest here and not a hostess. Have you had dinner yet? David asks from the living room. Had a snack on campus. She kisses Emma's temple. She looks at her husband's cold plate. He left her half the portion. A gesture of kindness that suddenly seems unnecessary. Did the seminar go well? Rough freshman, Caroline waves, unbuttoning her jacket. The phone in my bag blinked like a tiny firefly beating. She presses a flap of skin above the collarbone, where the mark of someone's finger still burns. David notices the distraction, but doesn't make any noise. He turns on the TV. Baseball, at least some general thing. Emma takes out the album. The pencil slides. Suddenly a thin, almost fuzzy melody from the TV and the tapping of a pencil coincide with the rhythm. Tick, tick, scratch, scratch. The heart of the house beats, but for every beat there is its own shadow. It's already past midnight. David checks the locks on the windows and flicks the switch above the sink as usual. Moonlight spills through the house. He enters the bedroom. Caroline is sleeping on the edge of the bed, barely touching half of it. The hair fell off the bun and spread across the pillow like dark algae. David sits down quietly so as not to wake him. In his hand is a book about wooden frames, but the letters pop up from the pages like loose boards, and he hides his face in his hands. The foundation can be repaired. The main thing is to notice it in time. Emma is stomping in the corridor, thirsty at night. He goes out to give her some water. The girl stands in the light of the refrigerator. A white beam cuts the darkness in half. Are you awake too? She whispers. Sometimes silence is louder than screams. Dad, Emma presses her cheek to his. You know I love you both. I know, kitten. He strokes her dark hair, the same as her mother's, only softer, even more honest. At this moment, it seems to David, if you hold on to this minute, everything else will definitely be fixed. The next morning, at breakfast, he announces, we'll go to Pinefall Lake on Saturday. Let's have a picnic and go canoeing, just like before. Tomorrow, Caroline clarifies, touching the cup as if checking to see if it will burn. I have another seminar. On a day off, students have a deadline for essays. The silence thickens like molasses. Emma catches her father's gaze, in which he hides either a request or despair. The girl wants to shout, Mom, stay, but my lips stick to the glass of juice. David takes a breath. We'll go anyway. Let's take sandwiches, a thermos. And when you're done, he turns to his wife, come. The Pine Falls sunset is worth all the deadlines. Caroline looks down. An unvoiced no sways inside her, but she says, it's good if I have time. Outside, the April darkness had thickened, and Caldwell Springs was drowned in a damp fog. The lanterns drew yellowish circles in the air, as if piercing the fabric of the night with a dull needle. The Hayes house smelled like baked chicken. David, wearing a flannel work shirt, took the pan out of the oven and covered it with foil to keep it warm until his wife's evening seminar was over. Emma lay on the carpet in the living room, painting a strange landscape with watercolors. Half-sunken houses, like cards, leaning over the dark water. The headphones fell halfway off her ears. Through the bit's radio head, a rare crunch of varnish on a brush could be heard. Hungry? Asked the father, sitting down next to him. A little. I'll wait for Mom. I want the three of us, as promised. She should be back by 9, David assured, mentally counting the extra 20 minutes already. At least eat some bread. Emma shrugged, but obediently took a bite of her warm baguette. David settled down on the sofa in front of the TV. The broadcast of a baseball game was buzzing, but my eyes wandered from the screen to the clock on the wall. 21:14. The cell phone lying on the coffee table vibrated. Number unknown. Hayes speaking, he responded automatically, muffling the sound of the match. Heavy breathing was heard on the phone, as if someone had just run a marathon and, after catching their breath, decided to call. Is this Caroline's husband? The voice was male, young, with a lazy grin in every vowel. Yes. Did something happen to my wife? David jerked forward, already imagining an accident, a fire, anything. At the other end they chuckled, as if they had heard something especially ridiculous. Ha! Funny that you asked that. No, everything is just fine with your wife. She is now taking a shower in my bathroom after we had a very good time. Consider this a friendly update. It was as if someone had shot a rubber bullet right into David's solar plexus. He almost bent over, pressing the phone to his ear harder than necessary. Who is this? Answer. The words stuck together in my mouth. My fingers turned white on the body of the receiver. Let's just say, buddy, I'm the one who knows what she does at the workshops. Believe me, I'm an amateur teacher. Flesh as metaphor and other post-structuralist joys. Okay, I won't take up your evening. Goodbye, or maybe see you soon. The signal was cut off. There was a crunch of silence in the living room, so dense that the TV seemed like a silent picture. Emma raised her head. Dad? He rushed to the kitchen counter as if to a saving island and, without opening either the tap or the refrigerator, simply stared at the empty wall. A short scene flashed before my eyes, like a frame from someone else's film. Someone else's hands were stroking familiar collarbones. It's okay, ice cream, he managed. The voice sounded so strained that it seemed like an understudy actor. Wrong number. Emma looked him up and down with a look that was too mature for 15, but remained silent. David rushed into the hallway, dialing Caroline's number. Subscriber is temporarily unavailable, a phrase similar to wet spit in the face. He tried again and again. No use. He loaded the navigation. The university campus was lit up on the map with a small view traffic icon. 18 minutes drive. I need to go to the site. The foreman with the sensor didn't understand the temperature of the concrete, he jabbered, pulling on his jacket. I'll be back quickly, have dinner without me. But it's too late, Emma whispered. Dad, you're shaking. He caught her hand. It's okay, I'm just tired. Closed the door behind me with a chain. David came out without feeling the cold, as if the skin had been replaced with a steel plate, and under the plate something fragile, like glass, was knocking chaotically. Ford cut through the fog, turning a bend towards Old Humanities Hall. The building was dark, with only one thin sliver of light leaking from an office on the third floor, not Caroline's office. David's fingers senselessly pressed the horn, as if the sound might call his wife out. He walked around the building. The side door, which is usually used by students, is closed with a magnetic lock. The man put his palm to the cold glass and saw his reflection faded, distorted, almost unfamiliar. Caroline, the cry jumped out involuntarily and immediately died in the wet trees. There was no answer. In the dimness of the apartment behind the city park, Caroline let out a stream of water, wiping the fogged mirror. An alien hovered on a marble shelf Old Spice. Faint goosebumps ran down my back, not at all from the cold. Did your husband call? Michael asked lazily from the bedroom, where the lighter clicked. He lay half-sitting, covered with a blanket, like a Roman emperor in an IKEA set. The phone was silent, she responded, eyelashes stuck together in drops. Don't think, don't think. I decided to speed up the process, he chuckled. I gave you a way out of your comfort zone. Caroline froze. What did you do? I called Mr. Hayes. I thought, let the hero also be involved in the plot. She exhaled sharply as if she had been hit. For what? Because you were going to tell anyway? Or because I would never dare? Michael stretched and, yawning, added, don't be angry. Catalysts make reactions more interesting. Caroline approached the bed, wrapping herself in a towel like armor. This playwright game could cost both of us too much. It's already late, Professor. Reality is written in dirty ink, and your husband has just flipped through the first page. Emma's bedroom was ajar. The girl was sitting on the bed with a laptop. A blue glow cast her face in a ghostly glow. You came back quickly, she said dryly. Yes. Everything has been decided, David lied, leaning on the doorframe as if the tree was holding him upright. Dad, were you crying? He didn't notice how his fingers wiped away the moisture under his eyes. A little. From the wind. It's damp outside. Emma nodded, but didn't believe it. Before closing the laptop, she said quietly, if something is wrong, will you tell me? Certainly. She hugged him, unexpectedly tightly. David felt that he was holding not a child, but a thin, ringing wire ready to burst from excess tension. David sat on the sofa with his knees clenched, as if trying to stop himself from rushing forward destructively. There were 2 suitcases in front of the coffee table, her suitcases. Blue Samsonite with the faded logo of the college where they met, and caramel Delsey, a gift from Caroline's parents for the first conference. The creaking of the clock hurt my ears. The pendulum struck like a hammer on a bolt wedge in granite. Car headlights flickered across the shutters. David stood up. The wife's steps along the porch are tink-clack, slow, as if she was still deciding to enter. The lock clicked. Caroline stood frozen in the doorway, holding her laptop bag like a shield. On the shoulder are drops of fresh rain, under the eyes are the shadows of sleepless lectures and elevator bars. She immediately saw the suitcases. What is this? The voice is hoarse, incredulous. Yours. This David said coldly, stepping towards her. I folded everything I could find in the closet until my hands went numb. Will you need a travel version of life? I helped. Caroline exhaled, glancing at the stairs where the beacon nightlight flickered. Where is Emma? Asleep? Or pretends like we pretended all this time? He looked up, wet eyelashes, reddened whites. Finally, tell me the whole truth. The voice broke, something unusually menacing sounded in it. All, Caroline, and without, it doesn't mean anything. The wife slowly put down her bag as if she was putting down a grenade, afraid to pull the pin. She sat on the edge of the chair. The lamp cast a harsh light on her face, emphasizing every wrinkle. Fine, she swallowed. It was Michael. Not twice, not three, several months. David swayed, clutching the back of his chair. For what? For adrenaline? To feel yourself alive? Are we dead? I was bored. David! She broke into English. 40, lectures, routine, you all in your beams, in estimates, eternal conversations. How was your day, dear? I was out of breath. Are you choking? He laughed, but the laughter rang out like broken glass. I built houses so that people breathed, and you decided to break out the beams in your own house. Caroline ran her hand through her hair, loosening the messy bun. I got bored of being an ideal. With Michael, it all started as an escape. We read poetry, drank wine, and laughed at how tame a penguin was at home. And I'm your trainer? The voice burned. Do you even understand? What did you break? It was a stupid hobby, quietly. Error. David stepped over the suitcase and knelt before her, as if he were wounded, but his face was flooded with tears and rage. Error. We are not a version of a manuscript that can be rewritten. He hit himself in the chest. Lives here, not a draft. He saw a slight bruise on her wrist, clearly the old mark of someone's grip. The eyes filled with pain. Did he hurt you? The whisper was icy. No, this. I caught the door handle. She looked away, and David knew it was a lie. Oh my God. He stepped back like an electric shock. You didn't just let this child take you away. Us, you let him leave his marks. Caroline clenched her hands. I'll stop everything. Already stopped. I didn't think it would turn out like this. Didn't you think so? David hit the table with his fist, and the plate with yesterday's cookies jumped. You are a literature professor. You teach plot logic. How can don't think? The silence was cut by a sob. Emma stood on the stairs in pajamas, with tear-stained eyes. If you divorce, I'll disappear, she shouted, breaking into a squeal. I swear I'll be gone. Emma flew down the steps, her bare heels hitting the wood like a drum. Stop it. The voice broke hysterically. I hear you through the walls, through the music, everywhere. She grabbed her father's sleeve, and her other hand grabbed her mother's jacket, as if she wanted to sew them together again. My cheeks were burning. You both swore that family was the most important thing. You lied. The words jumped from tongue to tongue. David tried to hug her, but she pulled away as if from fire. Listen, he whispered. We're trying. Are you trying? You're ruining everything right now. She hit his chest with her fist. If you break up, I won't be able to stand it. I'll disappear. Caroline rushed to her daughter. No, honey, listen to me. Don't touch me. Emma pulled back. Tears jumped from her eyelashes like silver bullets. You're not even at home. You come and smell like someone else's perfume. I thought it was a new department store eau de toilette, but it was he. The words cut like blades. Caroline staggered. Emma, she said hoarsely, it's my fault. Guilty? She sobbed. You taught me honesty, that lies rust on the soul, and herself. Enough, David shouted, covering his ears like physical pain. We don't want to hurt you. Already did. The girl ran her hand over her face, smearing her tears. Do you want the truth? Okay, I cut my skin when you scream. She lifted the sleeve of her pajamas, revealing thin reddish lines on her forearm. The world froze. David felt the air being knocked out of his chest. God, Caroline breathed, bringing her hands to her lips. Why didn't you tell me? Because you are not there. It broke. You're on campus. Dad is at a construction site. And here is only an echo of your misunderstandings. David fell to his knees in front of his daughter as if in front of an icon. Sorry. I'm sorry. I saw only boards and sums and did not see that the boards were cracking in my heart. He touched her hand. We will find help. Tomorrow. Caroline sat down next to her and put her hand on the girl's shoulder. Emma flinched, but didn't pull away completely. I ruined everything, the mother said quietly. But one thing is true. I love you until my last breath. Emma sobbed, I don't want to live in a house where love is numbers on a schedule. And I don't want to, David answered, looking at his wife. But I also love your mother, so much so that I patch up the cracks alive, even if my hands are bloody. Caroline nodded through her tears. We don't know how it will end, she whispered, but divorce is not an overnight sentence. We need to save you first, and then deal with us. Emma covered her face with her hands. Do you promise? Promise you won't leave me alone? David extended both arms like a bridge. I swear, deaf but firm. Tomorrow we'll go to Dr. Jennings. You liked him, remember? Caroline added quietly, and in the evening, the three of us will sit down and outline the rules. Write on paper like an act of truce. The girl slowly wiped her eyes. What about the suitcases? David looked at them as if they were mine. He slammed the lids and set them against the wall. They will wait. For now, we are staying. Caroline stood up, swaying slightly, and took the suitcases by the handles. I'll take them to the pantry. Not to escape, but so that they wouldn't stick out like a threat. Her husband and daughter watched in silence as she carried the luggage around the corner, as if hiding evidence. The air remained thick, but streaks of light appeared in it faint, like the first lights of dawn. Midnight. The three sat shoulder to shoulder on the sofa. The TV was silently playing a silent sitcom. Emma was fiddling with a rubber bracelet under the blanket. You know, she said quietly, I almost forgot how we sat like this last summer, watching fireworks live. I wrote a poem then and didn't show it. Will you read it? Caroline asked. The voice trembled. Emma shook her head. Not yet. But maybe when I'm sure that they won't become a suicide note. David pulled his daughter closer. I will do everything so that your poems are about life, not about death. A new tear glinted in the corner of Caroline's eyes. She covered their hands with hers. The clock struck 12. The rain has stopped. In the semi-darkness of the living room, a small beacon night light still cast light on the steps, fragile, but persistent, like a family promise to survive among the waves. Monday morning smelled like wet strawberry soap from the hotel set that Caroline had bought at the store on the way home, as if she were trying to wipe the smell of someone else's cigarettes off her skin. David heard his wife splash water on her face and leave the tap on for a long time, as if she wanted to drown there the time in which they lived before. There was silence in the kitchen, but in this silence, for the first time in a long time, agreement was discernible, necessary to do something. Not for the sake of marriage, for the sake of the girl who slept, clutching a notebook to her chest like a life jacket. I signed us up, David said as Caroline entered, kicking through the morning shadows. Family psychologist. Wednesday, 5:30 p.m., Dr. Harper's office. She nodded. No, thank you. No, why? Just a cautious yes, as if she was agreeing to take an unpleasant medicine. And also with Emma to the children's Dr. Jennings. He's free tomorrow after school. The corner of her mouth twitched, either a nervous tick or a desire to ask if Emma was ready. Questions hung in the air, settling like powdered sugar on the burnt toast. Dr. Jennings's office. Tuesday, 15:45. The child psychologist met in a light green room, the walls of which were covered with quotes from Mr. Rogers and Roald Dahl. While Emma painted with watercolors at a low table, her parents sat in dumpling chairs by the door. You can stay, but remain silent, the doctor ordered gently. We need her to speak freely. Emma drew a simple horizon line, which for some reason broke in the middle in a zigzag. Tell me, what is it? This is the Earth after the earthquake, the girl answered calmly. People lived here, but now they're not sure whether to repair it. Jennings nodded, a gesture as non-judgmental as an empty glass. And if they do start repairing, what will be needed? Lots of wood. And glue, she looked at her father. But not clerical. We need one that grabs to death. David lowered his eyes. His fingers clutched the armrest as if searching for a tool. What would this glue be like? Honest, Emma said and moved on to paints, mixing blue with soot. The doctor slowly noted something on the tablet. David, Caroline, he said, closing the door to the playroom behind Emma. Your daughter has classic reactive stress. Self-harm is an attempt to make internal pain visible. She needs stability. This means that while you are sorting things out with each other, she needs a clear schedule. What time do we have breakfast? Who picks her up from school when we talk? Caroline looked up for the first time in 2 days. What if we fall apart? Then you tell her in advance. No later than an hour. There will be no more sudden collapses in this family. The idea of the meeting belonged to Emma. She brought a notebook and wrote on top in large letters, "Repair schedule," and drew empty squares. If you lose your temper, you give up, she explained. If there are more than 3 crosses per week, we go for an additional session. David nodded with the naive seriousness of a foreman accepting a technical assignment. Caroline grinned, but without sarcasm, rather in fear. The child took on the role of foreman of fate. Okay, she said. We agreed. Dr. Harper's office. Wednesday, 17:30. Dr. Evelyn Harper carried herself like someone always balancing between compassion and the rigorous mathematics of the psyche. On the shelf was a metronome clock that ticked like a heartbeat. So, are you ready to work on your relationship? She began, folding her fingers together. David immediately leaned forward. I'm ready. Any work, any deadlines. Harper noted the fervor. And you, Caroline? She leaned back in her chair. Her eyes seemed to look through the people to the distant mountains. I'm ready to try for Emma's sake. Not for marriage? The pause stretched like a fishing line. Caroline shrugged. Perhaps I'm just not sure that marriage still exists in the form it did. David bit his lip as if he had been slapped. We work with what we have, Harper summed up sternly. First exercise, mirror. Everyone needs to say what exactly they lost during the breakup. No charges. David, I lost the feeling that home is a fortress. I build walls for others, but my home was without a roof. Caroline, quietly, I lost the feeling that I was being heard. In this house, for a long time I was. A lecture with built-in automatic translation, but I wanted to become a dialogue. David raised his eyebrows. I thought I was listening. You heard the facts, but you didn't hear. The echo, she explained, truly looking into his eyes for the first time. The doctor nodded like a conductor marking introductions. Write it down, Harper said. Every evening, 5 minutes of listening without reacting. One speaks, the other does not interrupt, does not give advice, does not defend himself. Then you change. And write down what you heard on paper. David wrote it down in neat block letters, like a fire escape plan. Caroline glanced at the paper as if she were looking at a manuscript due date. They were sitting in the living room. Caroline spoke first. Sometimes I watch you fall asleep on the sofa with drawings in your hands, and I feel like I've been replaced with a 4B pencil. David wanted to object, but resisted. 5 minutes seemed like an eternity. He wrote down, pencil 4B woman. Then he said, when you read Pound aloud to Emma, your sibilant is so close, and I feel like a guest in my own home, as if I was invited to fix a lamp and not to be part of history. Caroline wrote, guest, lamp. The words were imprinted in her mind like Morse code for the first time she saw her marriage through his eyes. Emma sat on the stairs, listening to the squeak of a ballpoint pen. It seemed to her that each entry was a small patch on the torn fabric of the family. Emma brought a new picture. On either side of the crack stood 3 figures, and above them a long wooden beam on which was written rules. So the rules hold the family back? Asked the doctor. The rules are like scaffolding around a house under construction, she explained. Without them, the walls will fall until the cement sets. What is cement? Emma thought for a moment. Trust, but it takes a long time to dry. The senior foreman knocked on David's work van. Your wife is on the phone. He says it's urgent. My heart clicked like a broken cable. Maybe there was a crisis. He picked up the phone. Carol, what happened? Nothing. Bad, breathless laugh. I just wanted to say that Emma received an A+ for her literature project. I just thought you might want to know right away. David leaned on the crane hook. "Thank you for calling." He caught himself thinking how strange it was to hear softness in her voice without ice. "Congratulations to her from me." "Congratulations to yourself. We'll cook dinner. I'll run to the store." "What's your favorite pasta sauce?" "The one you once made with Parmesan and cream." "I'll take it," Caroline nodded. An unfamiliar light seeped into the pause. On Jennings' recommendation, the three of them went to the Willow Glen farm to feed the horses and just be silent together to restore the bodily memory of a family in which there is no screaming. Emma strokes the pony's face. David holds his daughter's hand so she doesn't get scared. Caroline holds out a carrot. For the first time in months, they stand close, shoulders touching. "Remember when Emma was 7 and she was afraid of those giant teeth?" David whispers. "And you said, 'The teeth are big, but the smile is honest.'" Caroline smiles, and their laughter rolls across the meadow like a morning ball. The shadow of Michael Rivers flashed in her mind, but did not remain, like a random sparrow that fluttered when three people sat nearby, becoming closer together. At home, they lit the fireplace, a rare thing, because they were usually tired. David added a log, and the fire cracked. "Your word, Mom," Emma said, holding out a notepad for listening. Caroline sighed and looked from the flame to her husband. "I burned Michael's letters yesterday," she admitted. "Not out of shame, but because they kept me in a place where I no longer live." David inhaled, as if for the first time that day. Emma nodded, not asking for details. "My word," he said. "Today I left the foreman at the construction site to inspect the concrete so that I could be here on time. I used to think that work was on fire. Now I understand. The family is burning." Caroline noticed how Emma's eyelashes fluttered. The girl felt the first breath of trust. "What has changed for you?" asked the doctor. "David, I found myself being a little less afraid of the silence between us." Caroline, "And I caught myself hearing this silence. Previously, it was like a vacuum. Now it's like a pause in the music, waiting for the choir to join." Harper smiled at the corner of her lips. "Good image. But remember, the choir will not enter on its own. You need rehearsals. The next exercise is letters from the future. Write each other a letter dated a year from now. Describe what you are proud of in this marriage and in your family. Read it at your next meeting." After midnight, David at the kitchen table, illuminated by the moon, writes, "April 26th, 2026. We celebrate Emma's graduation, and she reads a poem where the house stands straight and the shadow is now straight. I look at you and understand we didn't build walls, we built bridges. I'm crying, but these are tears of joy because the glue you came up with turned out to be stronger than concrete." He puts the letter in an envelope. In the bedroom, Caroline writes, "April 26th, 2026. Today is a year since we missed a single listening evening. Our house smells of wood and books, which means that history still lives in it, not a lecture or a drawing, but a fabric in which the three of us are woven into one pattern. I am proud that I have learned to love you with a new ear, an ear that appreciates the framework of your words, not just their facade." She signs C and hides the envelope under the pillow. Emma, feeling the rustle of paper, knocks on the door. "Can I wrote a line?" "Of course," the mother answers. The girl opens her notebook. "And if the house makes noise again, let it. After all, noise is the heart, and we are his vessels." David wipes the corner of his eye. Caroline smiles through her tears. "Noise is life, honey," the father whispers. It turns on the beacon night light. Light creeps along the walls, meets faces, and it seems. The cracks into which darkness previously penetrated are now filled with a warm yellow glow. The May gloom was gathering in the yard, and the fresh greenery smelled almost sweet, but the haze lived again, as if they were listening to the predatory rustle beyond the threshold. The only light in the house was over the kitchen table. David was putting together an estimate for the floors, Emma was doing algebra, Caroline was making a cocoa latte, a family ritual against evening fears. The radio was whispering news of the coming storm in a low voice, when the phone on the tabletop came to life. The number is hidden. For the second week, such calls happened every other day, and each time David's heart boiled like bitumen in the sun. He picked up the phone, motioning for his wife and daughter to remain silent. Hayes speaking. At the other end is a quietly smiling baritone, immediately recognizable. "Hello, Dave. Don't switch off, okay? I'd just like to hear you breathe." "What do you need, Michael?" "Remind me of the truth. She's not yours, David." The lighter clicked in the receiver. "She always smiles when she's with me, and she cries when she's with you." David gritted his teeth. Cheekbones hurt. Nearby, Emma tightened her grip on her pencil, and Caroline grabbed her mug as if it were a lifebuoy. "That's enough," he said evenly. "One more call, and I'm going to the police." "Oh, harsh. Just keep in mind, I'm just a former student who cares about the professor. Who do you think the cops will ask first about her tears? Maybe a builder husband with a wonderful passion for hammers. The connection has been lost." The smell of burnt milk remained in the air. The cocoa had escaped. An hour later, David was filing a harassment report on the Caldwell Springs Police Department's online form. His fingers trembled as he typed, "Regular threats, persecution, psychological pressure on the family. Separate line car number, black Dodge Charger Con, plate 2HR91B. Emma took a photo of him during the day when she saw a familiar silhouette along the sidewalk. "Is it really him?" asked David. "I saw it in the rearview mirror when my mother was driving me to Jennings," the girl answered quietly. "He sat there as if he was waiting for us to turn." Caroline squeezed her husband's hand, a fragile gesture, but for the first time without detachment. "I'll talk to the university. Michael will no longer be on campus." David didn't answer. He heard the therapist repeat, "Don't hide, act together." But now it felt different together, like two people pressing their backs together to fight off the same beast. Night. David tossed and turned in bed, listening to every click of the shutters. At 2:11 a.m., Fargate lit the windows. A car stopped in front of him. I opened the blinds, a black Charger, solid glass. The engine started idling, exhaling white vapor. David put on his jacket and went out onto the porch. The wind smelled of lilac and danger. "Hey," he shouted, "get out of here before it's too late." The headlights flashed distantly, as if in mockery, and the car drove away smoothly. David stood barefoot on the boards, feeling the blood pumping through his toes. They spent the next morning at Sheriff Greg Flynn's office. The service was small, and the hallways smelled of ink and donuts. Flynn, a high-cheeked man of about 50, listened to them and wrote everything down carefully. "There is a threat, but a protection order is issued by the court. We need proof of a real danger, a recording of the call, a photo near the house," he explained, tapping his pen. "Do you have an audio file?" "The phone automatically writes," David noted. "He has already forwarded the email to the police address." "Fine. We will require details. In the meantime, advice. Keep an event log, install a surveillance camera, and please don't be a hero." David nodded and Caroline spoke for the first time in hours. "Officer, he knows where I work. The university already knows, Mrs. Hayes. An injunction is a matter of days, while security will escort you to the parking lot." She turned pale. The official words about protection made the problem even more real. At home, David screwed a camera lamp with a motion sensor to the front cornice. Your hands worked automatically, as if at a construction site, but fear was buzzing inside. What if a silhouette with a weapon one day appeared in the lens? Emma walked out into the yard, holding 3 mugs of lemonade. As Dr. Jennings said, "Fear is noise, and we are vessels." "Here," she handed the glass to her father. "Are you my psychologist now?" He tried to smile. I don't want you to do everything alone." David squeezed his daughter's shoulders. "The 3 of us are together. He won't break us." Emma nodded and looked at the house. The orange light in the office window where her mother was preparing a lecture on T.S. Eliot's Hollow Men. The confusion of titles seemed frighteningly accurate to the girl. That same evening, the bell echoed through the walls. David put it on speakerphone. Caroline stood nearby, holding tightly to the tabletop. Wow, family listening center. Michael's voice chuckled. Hello, Professor. Did you miss me? Leave us, she said firmly, surprised at her own tone. This is the last warning. The last one? Wasn't it you who said that endings create catharsis? Are you sure we won't come to him? David stepped closer to the phone. I'm writing it down. Write it down. In court, you will read how she whispered my name. Caroline flinched, but didn't turn away. These whispers are over. I chose a family. Accept it. Family? The grin faded into static. She's doomed, David. She cries when she's with you. You're lying, David blurted out. Okay, let's check. The signal cut out, and Emma's cell phone upstairs immediately rang. The girl picked up the phone and screamed. David rushed up the stairs. Emma stood with the phone in her hand, her eyes wide. He plays the voice where Mom is. She didn't finish, dispelling the phrase with a sob. An anonymous number and the time 0 o'clock flashed on the screen. David took the device and turned it off. Emma sank to the floor, hugging her knees to her chest. This is a lie. This is a montage, he repeated like a spell. He wants to break us. Caroline sat down next to her and hugged her daughter. David looked at them and swore that tomorrow he would get a warrant, hire security, and change all the locks on the door. Dr. Harper looked more stern than usual during the session. The pursuer is looking for any gap. Guilt, discord, fear. You must become a monolith. How to do this? David said. Be honest, every day. And remember the goal, Caroline added. We are building trust for Emma, not a storefront for neighbors. Okay, Harper nodded. Then a new exercise, Common Fortress. You write a list of 5 things that make your family strong and 5 specific steps to protect yourself. You hang the list on the refrigerator. When Michael breaks in mentally, look there. Emma, who was sitting quietly, asked, What if he breaks in physically? Caldwell Springs had finally escaped the damp April wind. Starlings were chattering in the elderberries. The air smelled of steaming earth, and fresh paint. The Hayes kitchen was being repainted. David stood on the stepladder, rolling in the last dab of buttermilk cream. The paint shone like sugar icing. Just right, he responded, jumping onto the floor. The new chapter needs a warm background. Emma laughed as she pulled down an old school poster of The Waste Land, her mother's once favorite quote from the wall. I think T.S. Eliot deserves peace, she remarked. I agree, Caroline smiled, and after a moment's hesitation, added, there were already too many empty spaces in the house. The laughter was light, but not forced, something the family had not been used to for a long time. That evening, Caroline came out of the bathroom looking whitish. In your hands is a test, 2 clear cherry stripes. She met her gaze with her own reflection in the corridor mirror. 40 years old, thin rays in her eyes, and inside, suddenly, the germs of something completely unidentifiable, either reckless joy or fear. David was brushing the dust off his work boots when his wife called. Do you have a minute? Always for you, he replied, but when he saw her face, he frowned. Is something wrong? Caroline silently handed the test. Unspoken words swirled between them like pollen. Pregnant, David's whisper trembled. She nodded. The next second, he pressed her to his chest so tightly that the test almost broke. His laughter vibrated the glass in the cupboard door. Oh my God! He ran his hand through her hair. A second child. I didn't even dream of it. Me too, Caroline whispered, a mixture of tears and smiles flashing in her eyes. I thought my calendar no longer knew such surprises. The floor on the stairs creaked. Emma looked out carefully. Mom, Dad, I hear. An echo. Sweetie, David turned, beaming. We're going to be a big sister. The pause was tiny, but noticeable. Emma froze, looking from her mother to the test. Then her face blurred, as if someone had turned on a dozen garlands at once. Really? She ran into her parents' arms. "I'll pick a name, and I'll draw wallpaper." "Slower," Caroline laughed. "Confirm with the doctor first." Emma shook her head. "No, this family knows how to build without permits." David laughed. "There will be permission, but you're right. We have become stronger than any code." The obstetrician's office smelled of antiseptic and lavender. Dr. Lamb, a gray-haired professor with a soft R, ran a probe over Caroline's stomach as the screen glowed with blue-gray grain. 4 weeks, steady heartbeat, he said, leaning over. For 40, that's an excellent indicator. David squeezed his wife's hand. On the monitor, the mouse light pulsed like a distant beacon. "How many times can you fall in love?" he whispered. "Twice at least," Caroline answered, not taking her eyes off her new life. Dr. Lamb printed the picture. Emma, sitting by the window, caught the photo in her palm as if it were a fragile butterfly. "It's a tiny comma," she said thoughtfully. "The work is probably just beginning." David decided to convert the old guest room under the roof into a nursery. I removed the darkened wallpaper and exposed the slats. The smell of wood reminded him of the first spring after his wedding, when he and Caroline were painting the porch. "I want the walls to breathe," he said, screwing in new insulation. "With a child, only breathing walls." Emma brought sketches, on one watercolor clouds, on the other a boat sailing in the starry sky. "Which one should we take?" "Both," David decided. "Let's make clouds on one wall, the sea on the other. Let the child immediately understand that the horizon is a place where dreams meet." Caroline watched from the doorway, clutching her stomach, which was not yet giving away the secret. "It reminded me of a seminar on romanticism. The house as a symbol of immensity," she noted. "You see," the husband smiled, "your literature is still building worlds." She stood on tiptoes and kissed him on the cheek. "And your beams give them shape." Evening, fireplace. The family ritual of 5 minutes of listening became 5+. Emma passed the notebook one by one. "I'm afraid," Caroline said, "that I won't be able to stand the comparison with a young mother. Less strength, a lot of lectures, Michael. His shadow sometimes returns in dreams." David wrote, "I'm afraid I won't justify it. Support, stand nearby, remind me about therapy." "I'm afraid," he said, "that I'll miss important moments again because of work. I promise to limit overtime." Caroline nodded, making a note. "I, just scared," Emma gasped. "What to do if the baby loves you more?" The mother extended her hand. "Love is not divided, it multiplies. You will not lose your place, you will become the center." Emma grinned. "The center of a tornado." "More like a northern star," David explained, "so that the child always knows where to go." On Sunday, on the advice of Jennings, they again got out to the horses. David held the reins. Caroline laughed as the pony nipped at her sleeve. Emma clicked the Polaroid, capturing every laugh as proof of progress. "I keep the before and after of our family," she explained. "I'll make an art book soon. You'll call it Glue, the mother jokes. Or Noise is the Heart, Part 2, David winked. Laughter rolled across the fields, and even the May wind, which previously seemed a harbinger of anxiety, today sounded harmonious. In the evening, the police knocked not alarmingly, but formally. Sheriff Flynn held a folder. "Mr. Hayes, we have good news. Your application for a permanent warrant has been granted. Mr. Rivers must stay at least 1,000 yards away or be arrested." Caroline almost physically straightened her shoulders. "Will he appeal?" "Already tried. The judge is firm. Ever since we caught him in violation of a university parking lot, he's been walking on thin ice." "We are watching," Flynn assured. "Thank you," David said dully, closing the door. The joint fortress received a new moat. Caroline didn't sleep that night. David felt movement and opened his eyes. "Everything is fine." "He pushed," she whispered, smiling in surprise. "Our punctuation mark gives a cue." David put his hand down and froze, a light blow like a tiny drum. My heart sank with tenderness. "Forgive me if you ever doubted us. I doubted it myself. She covered his hand with hers. But you know what's surprising? We survived. David kissed her palm. We didn't just survive, Caro. We have learned to start again. Deeth Children's Room was ready. The family decided to make a reveal. They invited Harper, Jennings, Sheriff Flynn, and 2 neighbors who experienced troubled nights with them. When the door was opened, the walls shone with clouds and sea, and on the ceiling hung a paper model of a lighthouse, a gift from Emma. The baby will always have light, she said. Jerry, a veteran neighbor, shed a tear. I wish my son could grow up in a haven like this. The harbor is not drawings, corrected David, but the people who hold the mooring lines. Sheriff Flynn raised his glass of lemonade for strong knots. At the university, at the end of the semester, she taught the final course, Literature After the Disaster. The final slide shows a photo of a children's room. The students gasped. The text may collapse, she said, but the narrative lives on as long as we choose to continue. Life is the most stubborn form of art. After the lecture, she found David in the corridor. He held a sonogram, a new one, with the already recognizable outline of the head. You were applauded, he said. Secret. I applauded them from the inside, she smiled, touching her stomach. Every student is also a comma from which a novel will grow. The sun was setting, turning the clouds the color of peaches. David pushed Emma on an old swing while Caroline sat next to her, an open book clutched to her lap. What should we name the baby? He asked. Emma spun on the chains. If the boy is Jonathan, if the girl is May. Jonathan after whom? Jonathan Seagull, she giggled. Because I learned to fly. And May? Because May sky, Emma nodded at the sky. Caroline closed the book. I was thinking about Anne, if it's a girl, she admitted. In honor of Anne Carson, the poet who teaches us to look for light in a crack. David shrugged, raising a woman's palm to his lips. So it will be Anne May or May Anne. Or 2 at once, who knows? Caroline laughed, and Emma playfully rolled her eyes. Oh, plot twist. A lawnmower hummed on the next street, and the fences reflected the sunset like a golden ribbon. No dark cars, no calls, only the noise of life, which previously seemed like a threat, but now seems like music. David looked at his wife's face. It really felt warmer. Where once there was ice, the May rain crumbled. He remembered the draft letter from the future and realized the words were beginning to come true. The house stands level, and the shadow is almost straight, and somewhere inside, between the cloudy wall and the sea, a tiny heart beats, bringing the family ending closer, which they do not yet see, but which they are waiting for with all their hearts. While the warm August sun gilded the foliage outside the window, a rare peace reigned in the Hayes house. David sipped non-alcoholic beer and sanded the window sill in the future nursery. The sandpaper creaked, there was a smell of fresh pine, and Jackson Browne was playing softly in the phone speaker, the same playlist that the family psychologist called safe place music. Caroline left for her mother in the morning. She needed to bring an antique rocking chair for the newborn. Emma sat on the floor in the living room, painting a floral border for the same nursery with watercolors. Their voices echoed. Dad, are you sure you won't cut yourself? I promise. This is not a beam overhead, but just a windowsill. Emma giggled. A thin ray of light jumped across her brushes, and David, turning around, thought that if happiness exists, then it is somewhere here. It smells of paint and sounds like this. The rustle of paper, the melody of running on empty, a breath that finally does not whine with anxiety. The phone twitched in my pocket. Automatic gesture. Move the sanding sheet with your finger and remove the device with your other hand. The screen blinked. Received 1842. One multimedia message. The number has not been saved. First thought. Another spam about an extended warranty on a pickup truck. But the notification was highlighted with a red circle, contains media. David pressed, almost dropping the device from the vibration. A grainy photo flashed on the display. Beige sheets, the dim light of a table lamp, rumpled pillows. And in the middle naked Caroline, lying on her side, hair in a fan, palm under her cheek. The photo was taken from above, from the shadow of the room. The angle is such that the face is out of focus, but there is no doubt. On the nightstand next to him is an empty glass and a pack of condoms. David's hands went numb. My head seemed to drown in hot oil. My consciousness was trying to find a defect, installation, any artifact. No natural folds of skin, the tip of a mole under the shoulder blade that he once kissed. Everything is authentic. Immediately after, a second message appeared without emoticons. Congratulate me, old man. I'll become a dad. An invisible hand squeezed my chest. David collapsed on a chair, his fingers still holding the skin. He casually ran it over his own knee, scratching his jeans. The blood was roaring in my ears, beating out a rhythm like a sledgehammer on a sheet of steel. It's me. This is not me. It's all falling apart. Emma's footsteps were heard in the corridor. Dad, She saw his face and abruptly fell silent. What's happened? David palmed the screen. Lips trembled. Nothing. Dust got into my eye. Please bring a bottle of water. Emma frowned but left. Meanwhile, David unfolded the photograph and enlarged it. Bedsheet from the hotel seaport in white with a thin blue stripe, like on all their towels. He remembered, a year ago he was building an extension to the hotel. Michael knew the address. It's clear. I'll be a dad. The pounding of blood became louder. David clicked Media Message Information. Departure time 1841, geotag, New Haven, Connecticut. Caroline is supposedly now traveling from Danbury, where her parents live. It's at least 3 hours round trip to New Haven. Next thought, Emma shouldn't see this. He deleted the picture from the gallery, but not from the phone's memory. He'll need proof. He exhaled through his teeth, as if releasing poison. Emma returned with water. David took a sip, his throat burning. Dad, tell the truth. He couldn't find the words. He just pulled his daughter closer and buried his forehead in her crown. The watercolor smell of paint mixed with the salt of tears. I'm fine, kitten. I just suddenly remembered one. Difficult story. A story about the foundation. Her voice was quiet but sharp. Something like that. He tried to smile but couldn't. Keep drawing and I'll call my mom, okay? Emma nodded, although a slight shadow of doubt remained in her eyes. David went out onto the porch. The sunset painted the clouds copper. The wooden steps still held warmth from the heat of the day. He dialed Caroline. 1 beep, second, third. Subscriber is out of range. No message, no recent call. He imagined the road of Route 84, where cell service often jumps. While I was waiting, the phone beeped. Message not delivered. He reread, Where are you? Call back, urgently, and experienced a flash of melancholy. He sent these words the last time before the world collapsed. At 19:07 call. The number is hidden. He accepted. David. The voice was enveloping, a lazy baritone with a slight hoarseness. We haven't talked for a long time. I wondered if your interest in truth lessons was still there. Michael, David hissed. Let's go without formalities. I see your dream bedroom is in progress. Have you already thought of a wall color? I suggest a combination. Ivory betrayal plus shade of the cuckoo. Where is the photo from? Every word was given through clenched teeth. I took it an hour ago. Random light aesthetic, you know. The baby needs family albums. You're lying. Michael laughed quietly. Deduction. Or fear. David, she called me just as much as she cried on your shoulder. Haven't you noticed? Of course I noticed. I was just pretending to be the foreman of happiness. David felt his palms sweat on the phone. Listen carefully. Leave my family alone. Sheriff Flynn got a ban, and you know it. Is a criminal ban against biology? Funny. The voice became harsher. She's carrying my child, and you understand that. You've already nurtured other people's dreams, builder. It's time to give a real home to a real father. A click, and the line went dead. The wind tore off the leaves of the maples like a manuscript. My chest hurts. My brain was racing. Lie, extortion. But David knew what fakes looked like, and even more, what the truth sounded like. which you would prefer not to hear. 6 months ago, he caught his wife, and they were climbing out of the abyss. 6 months of faith, therapy, children's room. Is all this work really a set staged for the viewer who once again threw the stone? He checked the calendar. The deadline was now 15 weeks. Their reconciliation began exactly 7 months ago. The affair, according to Caroline, ended much earlier. But if Michael was with her later, 6 weeks ago, 4. The dates were tangled like wires. The bell rang in the house. David stood up. Through the glass, he saw a porcelain figure Emma, holding a mobile phone. Mom is on the line. He jumped up. He ran back inside and pressed the speakerphone. Caroline's voice crackled from the highway. Dev, the connection was lost. Is everything okay? The pause grew like a rust stain. Where have you been for the last 2 hours? He asked too calmly. At Mom's. She remembered that the chair had been disassembled, and she had to look for the missing bolts in the basement. Is something wrong? Emma's gaze darted. David exhaled, keeping his hands in his pockets to keep from losing his temper. We'll talk when you arrive, he finally said. This is important. You're scary. Is everything okay with Emma? Now, yes, he pressed end. After a short conversation with the Route 84 Gateway jammers, Caroline promised, I'll be there soon. David stared at the dark screen a little longer than necessary. It was as if there was a second, invisible message written there. Don't wait. He went up to the nursery, where there was the smell of fresh clouds and pine, and for the first time he felt that the paint smelled not of hope, but of mistake. The hands themselves removed the dusty suitcase from the hanger, the same blue one Samsonite. Next out of the cupboard came a caramel Delsey. The click of the locks was reminiscent of gun bolts, short, dull, irrevocable. Emma found her father in the bedroom, folding shirts into neat bars. The polyethylene of the protective covers crunched underfoot. A white bag with the logo of a children's store lay on the bed, never unpacked. Dad? She stopped at the door. Are you going somewhere? David continued to put things away, as if he hadn't heard. Step right, step left. The tuxedo hanger hit the wall. Dad. The daughter's voice trembled. He placed the stack with the collars facing the handle of the suitcase, straightened up, and slowly turned. We'll have to. For what? Because the family M, he said as hard as a piece of granite, is no more. She threw her head back as if his words had hit her chin. Is it because of that man? Yes. David took the phone from the table, clicked on the image, and handed it to his daughter. Emma glanced briefly, sobbed, and looked away. Emma sat down on the edge of the bed. There was a bead dangling from the string of her hoodie, which she twirled with her fingers like a rune. So that's it? Divorce? Legally later. In fact, today. And me? Barely audible. David sat down next to him, warningly leaving his hand at a distance. You will remain the daughter of both. I'll find accommodation nearby. We will meet, I will pay for college, and accompany you to rehearsals. But here I couldn't breathe anymore. Emma looked up, tears rolling down her cheeks. We treated the cracks so much. You said it was important to repair the foundation. There is a foundation, he sighed quietly, and there is quicksand, where concrete cannot be taken. We built on sand, She jumped up. No, the fist hit the plump pillow, and a mangled button flew out of it. You give up. You promised not to leave. David stood up and took her hands in his. I promised to keep you, not that I would live in a destroyed house. Sometimes it's safer to get out before the roof collapses on all of us. For a moment they were just silent, listening to their breaths hitting each other. I don't want to choose sides, Emma whispered. And you won't have to, he answered calmly. Love is not divided into halves. But trust, yes. And your parents' trust is no longer intact. Her shoulders shook again. David hugged his daughter. It was empty and icy inside, but he held this hug longer than any foreman holds a level. When the bubble leveled, he released. You are strong. You will survive. And let the therapy never stop. Emma nodded, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. Do you think the mother will abandon the child? David shook his head. No matter what blood he is, she will love him. and I will if it is my son or daughter, but there will be a wall between me and your mother." He rummaged in the drawer, took out a blank envelope, and inserted a note with instructions. "If you need me, call me, day and night, always." Gave it to the girl. "This is your key to my new home." Emma clutched the envelope like it was a walkie-talkie. When the daughter went to her room to pack her backpack to stay with Dad for the first 2 days, David returned to his suitcases. "All that remains is to slam the caramel one. I put a family photo on top. A school porch, 3 in bright jackets, January 2 years earlier. Under the glass, the frames were still smiling. He wanted to throw it away, but instead he removed the back cover, took out the photo, and hid it in his shirt pocket. The aroma of herbal tea wafted into the kitchen. Emma brewed mint, as Dr. Jennings recommended during days of anxiety. She placed the cup next to her father's backpack. "So that my heart doesn't freeze," she said quietly. He nodded, "Thank you," and returned to the desk. I took out a thick sheet. "Caroline, you ruined everything. The house is yours. I'm leaving. Decide for yourself how to explain this to Emma. D. No reproaches, no questions. The dot is like the cracking of an ice floe." He placed the note on the kitchen island and pressed it with a wooden beacon mobile taken from the ceiling of the nursery. The light of the plastic lamp slid over the words, as if he had already read them for his wife. At 15:28, a pebble creaked. Caroline's Subaru rolled slowly around the bend of the maple tree. David lowered the curtain and stood on the threshold, suitcases on both hands, Emma on the step behind, pale but even. The engine froze. Caroline got out with a rocking chair box. I noticed the luggage outside and stopped abruptly. "What's happening?" It broke. David didn't move. Ice in the voice. "The letter is in the kitchen. Emma knows everything." From behind, the girl clutched the strap of her backpack. Her face is dry. The tears have already ended. Caroline placed the box directly on the path. "David, let's talk inside, please. There is no place inside where there is no smell of lies. This is madness. You trust the blackmailer more than me. I believe the fact that he was able to film you sleeping in his bed." David squeezed the handle of the suitcase. Emma shouldn't listen to any more excuses. Caroline reached out to her daughter, but she retreated, hiding her gaze. For a second, everything was quiet, even the cicadas in the flower bed. All you could hear was the clicking of the air conditioner in the corner of the roof. Small, inappropriately calm tick-tick-tick. A neighbor's dog barked at the gate, like an alarm. "Are you really going to leave us?" Caroline asked hoarsely. "Won't you give the test a chance? The test will not restore trust." David stepped over the threshold. "I will remain a father, but no longer a husband." He turned to Emma. "Are you coming with me or staying?" The girl looked at her mother. There was panic and pleading in her eyes. Then she lowered her head. "I will stay with Mom, but tomorrow I will come to you. I am waiting." David exhaled and, without turning around, went down the stairs, his suitcases hitting the steps heavily. Caroline remained standing, pressing her palm to her stomach, as if protecting the unborn from the icy draft that had suddenly become the main tenant of their house. Above in the living room, the wind swayed the curtain, and the lighthouse beneath it swayed with a beam. A warning or a farewell, it's not clear. The truck door slammed. The engine roared. David had not left yet, but the start had been made. On the threshold, the family was no longer a three-sided figure. They were two parallel shadows, and one in between, too young to choose which wall to stay behind. The true ending of the scene hung in the air, along with the smell of mint. Whether to scream, whether to run, whether to stop. But while the tires quietly rolled back on the gravel, it seemed that even the sun slowed down so as not to get ahead of itself. The Caldwell County Courthouse looked like all New England law houses. Red brick, 4 white columns, a flag frayed by the summer wind. But for the Hayes family, this facade was the last wall that could not be painted over with cream paint. The lobby smelled of disinfectant and coffee from the machine. David, in a gray jacket, studied the tiles under his feet, as if looking for cracks. Next to him, Lawyer Jane Hawk put her hand on his shoulder, a gesture without speech, pure support. Emma sat on the bench, her fingers wrapped around the rubber band of her notepad. The dark blue dress made her look older, but 15 years of insecurity trembled in her eyes. Caroline stood on the other side of the corridor. The black suit is strict, almost professorial. The small belly under the jacket is barely noticeable. Nearby, her lawyer, Mr. Barrios, whispered something about best interest of the child, but Caroline did not listen. She looked at her daughter, wincing every time she moved her shoulders. All rise. The bailiff loudly announced the start of the hearing. Hall No. 3 resembled an amphitheater where instead of drama there was protocol. At the lectern is Judge Margaret Hanauer, a woman in her 60s known for issuing decisions in less time than lawyers could cite precedents. Fans hummed around, driving away the august stuffiness. The Hayes case, the judge said. The parties confirmed their intention to dissolve the marriage peacefully, but dispute custody of minor Emma Hayes. David looked up. His throat was dry. Peacefully sounded like porcelain that had already been broken. Jane spoke first. Your Honor, Mr. Hayes has been living separately in recent months, but continues to be the primary parent. He picks up his daughter from school, takes her to a therapist, and completely provides for her. The conditions in his home were confirmed by the social services report. Separate bedroom, safe environment. She handed the judge a folder. The sheets rustled like promises of strength. Barrios stood up. Mrs. Hayes is a university professor, a stable income, and will soon be on maternity leave, which allows her to devote more time to her child. My daughter is not a rented audience, Jane said quietly, but Hanauer raised her palm. Gentlemen, to the point. I need to hear Emma. The bailiff led Emma to the microphone. The girl straightened a lock of her ear, looked at the judge, then at her father, and finally at her mother. Dear, Hanauer's voice softened, do you understand that the decision you voice will greatly affect the order of life? Yes, ma'am. Who do you want to live with after divorce? The pause was longer than the drama dictated, but shorter than Caroline felt. Emma inhaled. With Dad. The words sounded clearer than a whisper of prayer. It was as if the pressure had been released in the room. Someone coughed quietly. Lawyer Barrios lowered his eyes to his tablet. Can you explain? The judge asked softly. It's calm with Dad. Emma carefully selected the letters. We worked on trust. Now he is a wall that does not shake. I need it. She licked her dry lips and added almost inaudibly. Mom is good, but now she's in pain, and the pain is loud. Hanauer nodded. Thank you. You can sit down. Emma returned to the bench, and David touched her shoulder, not victoriously, but carefully, as one would light a candle on a windy evening. The remaining formalities sounded like the distant sound of the surf. Recommendations for guardianship, a vacation schedule, joint holidays by mutual consent. At the phrase, primary physical custody is awarded to the father, Caroline covered her mouth with her hand. She tried to blink the tears in, but they came out 2 transparent paths, quickly, as if the dam had finally been broken. David saw this cry, the first living outburst in their years of cold. Previously, she cried quietly, in the shower, under running water. Now the tears lay on top of the makeup, leaving dark streams. The judge shifted her gaze. Mrs. Hayes, do you want to add anything? Caroline stood up, forgot about the microphone, and spoke to the audience. I love my daughter. I respect her choice. I hope one day she will come to me herself. The voice broke. Caroline sat down, clutching her handkerchief. Her hands trembled, her stomach twitched slightly from a sob that she did not allow to sound. The court ordered, Hanauer said dryly, to dissolve the marriage, award physical custody to Mr. Hayes, and establish an extended communication schedule for the mother. Every other weekend, half of the holidays, daily scheduled video calls. Execution is immediate. The hammer hit once, as if the last bolt had been screwed into the structure. The crowd slowly dispersed. There were no reporters, the story was ordinary, only for the heroes it seemed universal. David held the documents, Emma held his palm. Caroline approached. Her eyes were red, but her step was even. "Can I?" She extended her hand to her daughter. Emma paused, then hugged her mother. The length of the hug is 3 heartbeats. "I still love you," Caroline whispered. "I know," Emma replied. "We're just in different houses." They separated. Caroline looked at her ex-husband. "Thank you for not closing the door." "I only close those that have become dangerous," he responded. "And the doors are always open for Emma. And for the child, too." She nodded and touched her stomach. For a second, the old university determination flashed in her gaze, as if she was still a professor, but today she was learning from life and not teaching. On the porch of the courthouse, the sun was blazing in my eyes. Emma squeezed her eyes shut, then smiled, not a happy smile, but rather the grateful smile of a survivor. "What now?" she asked. David squeezed her hand. "Now ice cream at Broad Street, then home." "Home," Emma repeated. The word sounded uncertain, but without pain. Caroline remained at the door, watching them go. The father in a gray jacket, the daughter in a blue dress, the two shadows almost merged. She wiped away another tear, took out her phone, and dialed Dr. Harper's number. "This is Caroline Hayes. I need an unscheduled session to learn a new beginning." The other end agreed. She hid the phone and ran her hand over her stomach. "We can handle it, baby," she whispered, "even if the bridges are broken. We will find a crossing." The wind lifted the corner of her jacket and almost immediately lowered it, like a tiny bow. Inside the theater of justice, the gavel was already being examined by court clerks. The performance ended, but the actors were still standing on stage, learning to speak without lines. The term had almost reached Halloween when David found himself waking up without an alarm, but later than before. No one demanded oatmeal be made by 6:30 because no one else was late for university lectures. Instead, he hard-boiled lazy eggs. He threw them into the pan, set a timer, and went to wake Emma. "Come on, Captain," he joked, throwing open the blinds. "We still have to conquer the world, or at least the school gallery." Emma unraveled her headphones, winced, but stood up. The new school, the one closer to David's studio apartment, took her to the art club. Every Tuesday, the girl returned with her palms stained with acrylic, sometimes periwinkle blue, sometimes the color of rotten apples. "I think I've learned to mix sadness with hope," she explained, twirling her brush. "It turns out to be dirty purple." David just nodded. The foreman, who smelled of plaster, could barely distinguish the shades, but now he was learning. He bought the Pantone for Artists catalog and spent his evenings checking how pigeon gray differed from fog gray. Their new apartment was located above a bakery in the mornings. The smell of cinnamon drowned out the smell of fresh paint. Upon moving in, David and Emma considered this a good sign, as if life had immediately released a baking aroma to show that nothing had been burned. My daughter now has her own office room. At first, the walls seemed tarpaulin alien. Then Emma came up with a memory strip. She glued a horizontal strip of Whitman paper along the top edge and drew a new symbol of the day on a piece every evening. In 2 months, the strip turned into an endless comic: a house on stilts, a tiny box boat, a cup of coffee with the inscription "Dad's new burner," a broken pencil, which then continued with a line as if it had been spliced. "It's like an Edison tape," Emma explained. "Only not a sound, but an emotion." David, pouring tea, answered, "The main thing is that the end of the film is happy and not like a horror film. There are no endings," the daughter shrugged. "There are pauses and new reels." On his first, no-plan Saturday, David tried to bake an apple pie. The YouTube video assured that it's not difficult, guys can do it too. The dough was sticky, the filling was porridge, and the grill on top sagged. Emma ate 2 pieces. "The taste of childhood," she said. "She's a joker," my father waved him off, but kept the recipe. A month later, cake no. 4 was already holding its shape. French braid. David braided Emma's hair in the morning, at first awkwardly, with strands straying out, then okay, almost symmetrically. A teacher once said that Braids look like they're made of Little Women, and David actually smiled. First exhibition. In November, the school's art club staged a mini exhibition. Emma's painting is an abstraction of bluish-gray brushstrokes, like a torn cloud from which flecks of gold grew. Name, Healing Walls. It's about how wounds can be windows, the girl explained to a reporter from the school newspaper. David stood aside with a disposable cup of cider and thought that maybe adults' wounds could glow too. While the two were learning to live, the third house was silent. White siding, mailbox haze a name that no one approached anymore. Inside there was a smell of lavender dust. The bags from my mother's chest had long since weathered, their aroma mixed with old paper. Caroline walked the corridors like a ghostly tour guide. In the living room there was a box of children's clothes that she had once bought for growth for her unborn child. The tags were still hanging. She laid out old photographs on the dining table, a picnic at Pinefall, with David in a funny Panama hat holding 7-year-old Emma on his shoulders, family Christmas 3 sweaters, one pattern. 1st of September, Caroline adjusts her daughter's collar, David clicks the camera. His fingers stroked the glossy paper, as if trying to straighten out time. Tears appeared rarely, more like a heavy lump in the chest. Not a sob, but an empty sound in a bell. There was a duster on the rocking chair under the window. Caroline took it off, but the chair did not rock. The house was too quiet. She sat down herself and slowly rocked the wooden arches. I made a choice, a whisper addressed to the void, and the choice returned echo. Her lawyer assured that if she wanted, she could seek a change in guardianship, but Caroline was in no hurry. She had video calls at 8 o'clock in the evening, when Emma showed her feed of the day, and David stuck his head into the frame and waved. These 15 minutes were the only time when the empty house was filled with voices. They ended with "good night," and again there was a ringing silence, as if the world had turned off the sound. A week before Thanksgiving, David asked his daughter, "Do we want a traditional turkey for 3 or get creative?" Emma shrugged. "Make it for 3 together. We'll leave the third place empty, like an Irish chair for Elias." Eliasa, that's what the Celts called an absent person who is still expected at the table. The turkey came out juicy, the sweet potatoes were warming in the oven, and the empty plate in front of Emma stood untouched. Before eating, David, out of habit, suggested saying what everyone was grateful for. "I am for the fact that life is still being built," he began. Emma added, "I am for the fact that the colors only run out when you paint. Feelings end when you stop. I will continue." The empty plate was silent. David raised his glass of cider. "For those who will understand what they have when it becomes the past." Emma nodded, understanding flashing in her eyes. Far away in the house on Maple Drive, Caroline closed her laptop after a video call and whispered to the darkness, "Thank you that they are still smiling." The 1st December snow lay on the roof of the empty house in a thick, silent layer. Caroline went out onto the porch, raised her head to the translucent sky. Flakes were falling never the same, fragile like promises. She imagined David and Emma probably making pie no. 9, arguing about which turkey tail was the cutest, and for a second she could almost smell the cinnamon. In her hands, she held an envelope, a letter that she was going to send. "Emma, if you ever want to come back for a weekend, the rocking chair is waiting for you. There is still a place where the noise can be warm." She didn't know if her daughter would read it, but the letter warmed my palms like a cup. The creaking of a broken porch step was a reminder. David was always going to fix it. Now there is no one. Caroline took a hammer and nails tools, among which she felt like a stranger, and, shivering from the cold, began to straighten the board. The hammer clinked unevenly, but each blow sounded like a small confession, as if the house was demanding a confession. "I destroyed it. Now I'm fixing it, even if it's a small thing, but I'm fixing it." The snow kept falling, enveloping the sound, as if promising, "What is more important is not volume, but sincerity." It's already night. In the apartment above the bakery, David turned off the light, checked that the door was chained, and looked into his daughter's room. Emma was sleeping, clutching her sketch pad to her chest, and from under the blanket a new piece of Whatman tape was peeking out, the silhouette of a house crooked, but with a golden window frame. A yellow line flowed from the window. David closed the door quietly. He did not yet know how to play the role of both mother and father, but he knew. In any drama, it is more important to keep at least one room lit. In his bedroom, before going to bed, he wrote in his notebook, "I'm learning to distinguish between two types of silence, the one that corrodes and the one that heals. The first one lived in an old house. The second is in our efforts not to remain silent with each other. The main thing is not to mix it up." He smiled for the first time in hours and put the diary on the shelf. The aroma of fresh cinnamon curls wafted from the street as the baker prepared the morning batch. Life, as someone smart would say, still smells like bread. January spread its silver wings over Caldwell Springs. The sidewalks were crumbling with blue frost, bakery windows were fogged with sugar, and in the apartment above the bakery, life went on according to a new, already familiar, schedule. At 7:15 concept sketch, at 8 bus, Emma muttered, checking her diary with Pantone colors. Over the course of a year, she learned to wake up early, carry drawing tubes the way others carry purses, and say, "Thanks, Dad," whenever David reminded her. "Cover your eyes, the coal is flying." David himself mastered the role of a single father under the motto, "Quietly fix everything that is loose." In the evenings, he read articles about grants so that his daughter could pay for the prestigious Rhode Island Institute of Art. On Saturdays, I tested new recipes for pies, already the 14th version. It seemed that the main danger now was the schedule of admissions committees and slippery steps. But under the watercolor layers of life, there remained a wasteland. The name Caroline they spoke rarely, like a word from a forbidden dictionary. A feeling of understatement lived between the lines of morning conversations. Emma would sometimes pause, as if about to ask a question, then say, "I'll take lunch from school." In mid-February, as freezing rain blanketed the East Coast, David found a cream-colored envelope with no return address in his mailbox. The handwriting is the same, strict university calligraphy. David, I lack the words and rights to ask, but I still ask. Let me see Emma, one time, on your terms. I want to ask her for forgiveness. I want to say that I love her every day. If she is unwilling, I will accept silence. 2. The note was short, like an injection of adrenaline. David sat at the kitchen table and listened to the tick-tock learning to beat inside his chest again. Over the past year, his heart had become accustomed to beating evenly. He folded the letter back and took his daughter into the room. "It's only your decision," he said quietly. Emma took the envelope and blew on the edges, as if she was afraid of getting burned. She read the words without sound. Then she looked up. "I will think. I won't persuade you," the father promised. She nodded and placed the letter in her tube, as if in a pencil case. Emma walked around for a week with the feeling that there was a piece of paper stuck in her chest. She made sketches. Her hand drew angular figures. In each one, a woman's face with a cut-off outline could be discerned. In a composition class, Professor Sawyer said, "You have a lot of dynamics, Miss Hayes, but the center is empty. See if you are deliberately leaving a white spot." Emma returned home and spent the whole evening staring at the empty spot. At midnight, a new cell appeared on the comic strip, the silhouette of a saloon door, one door slightly open, the other not. Signature, maybe. On the 7th morning, while spreading strawberry jam on her father's pie, she exhaled. "I'll meet her. Once." David didn't ask, "Are you sure?" He only said, "Where and when you tell me. I'll wait nearby." We chose neutral territory, Maple Bean, a cafe near the bus station that smelled of maple syrup and freshly ground Colombian Supremo. Emma arrived 20 minutes early. The snow falling behind the glass seemed like a ceremonial backdrop to her nerves. She chose a table in the corner and sat with her back to the wall. Jennings's advice, "It's more alarming, but safer. You can see everyone coming in." Fingers slid over a glass of hot chocolate. The clock showed 16:07 when the door shook. Caroline is exhausted and aged. His hair was tied up like a doctor on duty, dark moons under the eyes. In her arms is a dark blue stroller. A baby was snoring inside. Emma jumped up. "You're late." I looked for 40 minutes for a parking spot and Caroline stopped short, noticing how her daughter was looking at the stroller. I didn't want to shock, but I have no one to leave with. "This is Liam." "He's not my brother," Emma said dully and returned to her chair. The guest froze, squeezed the handle of the stroller, then moved it to the wall and sat down opposite. "Emma, thanks for coming. I I don't even know how many words of sorry will be enough. Probably as many years as I had to learn to live without my mother. There were 16 of them, right?" Caroline looked down. "I was broken, and I broke you. I thought I was looking for freedom, but I found the desert. The desert is what is left after you. You have the right to be angry. I cheated, I lied, I lost. But every day after the trial, I learned to breathe without you and realized love is about building, not looking for holes." Emma squeezed her mug until her knuckles turned white. "Build. Dad built it. You destroyed the walls, said that they were holding you back." Caroline clasped her fingers. The cut scar on her ring finger had turned purple. "I know it in my bones. I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness. I want a bridge, even if it's narrow, even if it's made of rope, but a bridge." Snowflakes drummed against the window, like the applause of an audience that was too alien. "I didn't die without you. I write poetry, go to college, and Dad. He became a mom, too." Caroline covered her mouth. "Are you applying?" "God, congratulations." "Oh, how I wish." "I wanted to, but I wasn't," Emma sighed sharply. "Do you know what it's like to wake up at night when you're dreaming, and then spend an hour convincing yourself that the dream won't happen again?" The words cut the air like a dough knife. Caroline exhaled with a groan. "I know what it's like to wake up and realize you're not there." The baby began to stir. She picked up the gauze pad and adjusted the pacifier. "Is he really Liam?" Emma asked coldly, looking at the baby. "Yes, I looked at the name in the Irish calendar. It means determination, protection." "And what will he defend? Are you feeling guilty?" Caroline lowered her head to the stroller. "He protects my ability to love differently." "No lies. I keep your photo above his crib and say, 'This is your sister, the most talented girl in the world.'" Emma looked away to the window where snow crumbs filled the entire glass. "Sister is a mutual status," she said quietly. "For now, he is only the child of the woman I loved and lost." The waiter delivered the check. No one touched it. Time inside the cafe slowed down. Only the clock above the bar ticked, like a distant metronome of a family drama. "I go to Harper's every week. I'm trying to learn how to build with crushed stone." She says, "The first brick is honesty." Here's my honesty. Everything Michael did was an escape. I didn't lose you because of his blackmail. I lost because I ran away. Emma took a sip of the cooled chocolate and grimaced. "It's worse that you ran inside us and destroyed everything there." Silence fell. Caroline covered her face with her hand. "Sorry." Emma nodded slowly. "Forgiveness is not a word. This is the way, long as a canyon. Maybe I'll get there. No promises." She took a folded sheet from her backpack, a print of the painting Healing Walls. Signed on the back, "For Liam to know that wounds can be gilded." "Take it. It's not a bridge, it's a plank. But that's enough for now." Caroline took the paper with trembling fingers. "Thank you." Emma stood up first. "I have to go. Portfolio class at 6. May I accompany you?" "It's better not." "Can I call you?" "Right. I will answer when I can breathe." She cast a last glance into her mother's pupils. There were lakes of endless apologies. Then she turned, threw her backpack over her shoulder, and walked towards the exit, as if she were walking along a long gallery corridor where the walls reflect only one canvas time. The doorbell rang and cold air rushed into the cafe. Caroline sat there like a puppet with its strings cut. Baby Liam slept, snoring. In the mother's hands is a print of the painting, a gray cloud with golden seams. Caroline began to cry, not loudly, but the tears were thick, like honey. They flowed down her lips, leaving a sweet taste of loss. Long way, she whispered. I'll go. I'll go, Em. She pressed the drawing to her heart to where the brokenness of past years had fused around a new little heart. Outside, a snowstorm closed the city with a curtain. Inside the cafe, the world has stood still. The lost mother and her chance are the only hot drink that has not yet cooled down. On the street, Emma breathed in the icy air. It burned her lungs, but was cleaner than the air in the cafe. Tears flowed for the first time in a long time. She allowed them to flow without shame. David came out of the parked pickup truck. She rushed to her father and buried her face in his woolen collar. Hard. Yes, the voice trembled, but a little easier. She stepped back and looked at the sky. Snowflakes fell on her eyelashes, melting like silent answers. You know, Dad, she said quietly, probably forgiveness is like restoring an old painting, layer by layer. I took off the first one. David nodded. And then the brush is in your hands. They went to the car. Behind the glass of the cafe, Caroline sat, covering the stroller with a blanket, and looked at the road. Far outside the windows, the city shimmered with garlands. Valentine's Day is coming, a holiday of love that does not guarantee reciprocity, but reminds us that the heart can still beat. Emma wiped her tears with her sleeve and smiled thinly, but honestly a drop of liberation was rolling somewhere under her chest. Ahead were portfolios, exams, new letters unanswered, perhaps for another year. And the snow continued to fall like an extra long film, whose frames can be filled with new light if you have the patience to finish the seams with gold. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.